I stood there in the blinding Colorado sun, squinting at the empty spot where our car had been just 10 minutes ago. My wife, Chloe, and her friends, Isla, Stephanie, and Lauren, had vanished. At first, I thought it was one of their stupid pranks. They were always doing stuff like this, pushing boundaries, testing how much I'd take before I snapped. 5 years of marriage, and I'd gotten used to their little games, the way they'd laugh at me, the way Chloe would join in instead of standing up for me. But this felt different. My phone was still plugged into the car charger, my wallet tucked in the glove box. All I had was the faded t-shirt and jeans I was wearing, and a growing pit in my stomach as the minutes ticked by. We'd been on this road trip to Stephanie's lake house for 3 days now, and I'd been miserable the whole time. Chloe had begged me to come, said it'd be a chance to bond with her crew. I wasn't big on the idea. Her friends always treated me like an outsider, tossing out jabs and inside jokes I wasn't part of, but I went anyway, because I loved her. Or at least, I thought I did. The gas station was in the middle of nowhere, just a dusty little stop off the highway with a flickering sign and a single pump. I'd gone inside to use the bathroom, figuring they'd wait. They always waited. Except this time, they didn't. An hour passed. I paced the cracked pavement, kicking pebbles, telling myself they'd come back any second, tires crunching gravel, Chloe's voice calling out, "Gotcha." But the road stayed quiet. 2 hours in, sweat was dripping down my neck, and my throat was dry. I kept replaying the last few days in my head. The way Stephanie smirked when she accidentally spilled coffee on my lap. How Lauren whispered something to Chloe that made her giggle while glancing at me. How Isla just watched it all with that smug little grin. I should have seen it coming. They'd been building up to something, and I'd been too dumb to notice. A truck pulled up, its engine rumbling loud enough to shake me out of my thoughts. The driver, a big guy with a gray beard and a stained ball cap, leaned out the window. "You okay, buddy?" Been standing there a while. His voice was rough but kind, and it hit me like a punch. I wasn't okay. They weren't coming back. Chloe wasn't coming back. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, my ride left me. You think you could help?" He nodded, like it wasn't the first time he'd seen someone stranded out here. "Hop in." "Where you headed?" I didn't even know. "Home. Back to Chloe, the life we'd built." But as I climbed into the cab, something shifted inside me. 5 years of her laughing at me, brushing me off, letting her friends treat me like garbage. It all came rushing up, hot and heavy. I stared out the window as the gas station shrank in the side mirror. The trucker didn't ask too many questions, just kept driving, humming some old country song. My hands clenched into fists on my lap. I could have borrowed his phone, called Chloe, demanded answers. But what would she say? "It was a joke, babe. Don't be so sensitive." I'd heard it all before. Every time I complained about her friends, she'd roll her eyes and tell me I didn't get their humor. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I never would. But standing there alone, abandoned like some stray dog, I realized something. They didn't get me either. And Chloe? She'd picked them over me, again and again. The trucker dropped me off at a crossroad, pointing me toward Grand Junction, the nearest town. "Good luck, man," he said, tipping his cap. I nodded, my throat tight, and started walking. My shoes scuffed the dirt, the sun beating down on my head. No phone, no money, no plan, just me and the open road. Part of me wanted to turn back, to beg someone at the gas station to call her, to fix this. But another part, a louder part, kept pushing me forward. I was done being the punchline, done being the guy they laughed at. Chloe and her friends thought they'd won, thought they'd broken me. But as I trudged toward Grand Junction, a strange calm settled over me. They hadn't broken me. They'd set me free. I didn't know what was waiting for me in that town. I didn't know how I'd eat, where I'd sleep, or how I'd get by with nothing. But for the first time in years, I wasn't scared of what Chloe would think. I wasn't worried about her friend's next move. I was alone, yeah, but I wasn't helpless. The road stretched out ahead, endless and empty, and I kept walking. They'd left me behind, but maybe that was the best thing they could have done. Maybe this was my chance to figure out who I was without her, without them. By the time the sun started dipping low, turning the sky orange, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going back. Not to Chloe, not to that life. Whatever came next, it was mine to build. I stood at that dusty crossroad where the trucker dropped me off, the Colorado wind kicking up little swirls of dirt around my feet. Grand Junction was somewhere ahead, but I didn't have a map, a phone, or a dime to my name. Just the clothes on my back and a head full of spinning thoughts. Chloe and her friends had left me high and dry, and part of me still wanted to find a way to call her, to hear her voice, to demand she turn the car around. But then I remembered how she'd laughed when Stephanie accidentally knocked my beer over at the lake house, how she'd shrugged when I asked her to stick up for me. 5 years of that. 5 years of feeling like a guest in my own marriage. No, I wasn't calling her. Not this time. I started walking toward town, my sneakers crunching on the gravel. The sun was still high, baking the ground, and sweat soaked through my shirt. I didn't know how far Grand Junction was. Miles, probably, but I didn't care. Every step felt like a choice, like I was leaving her behind one footprint at a time. My mind kept drifting back to the gas station, to the moment I stepped out of that grimy bathroom and saw nothing but empty pavement. They'd planned it, hadn't they? Chloe, Stephanie, Isla, Lauren, all giggling in the car as they peeled out, thinking it'd be hilarious to ditch me. I could almost hear Chloe saying, "He'll figure it out, he always does." Well, I was figuring it out now, just not the way she expected. A pickup truck rumbled by, and I stuck out my thumb, hoping for a lift. The driver, a guy with a scruffy beard and a faded flannel shirt, slowed down and leaned out the window. "Need a ride?" he asked, eyeing me like he wasn't sure if I was trouble. "Yeah, heading to Grand Junction," I said, keeping my voice steady. He nodded. "Hop in. I'm going that way." I climbed into the passenger seat, grateful for the break. The cab smelled like oil and cigarettes, but it beat walking. "What's your story?" he asked as we rolled down the highway. I hesitated, then shrugged. "Got left behind by some people I thought I could trust." He grunted, like he'd heard that one before. "Happens more than you'd think out here." He dropped me off on the edge of Grand Junction, near a cluster of low buildings and a blinking traffic light. "Take care, man," he said, and drove off. I stood there, taking it in. A small town with a mix of old brick storefronts and newer chain stores. People going about their day like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong for me. No wallet, no ID, no way to prove who I was. I needed help, and fast. I spotted a sign for a homeless shelter a few blocks down, a plain building with a cross painted on the side. My stomach twisted at the thought. Me in a shelter? But what choice did I have? Inside, it was dim and smelled like bleach and stale coffee. A guy behind the counter looked up. Roy, his name tag said. He was older, maybe 50, with a shaved head and a no-nonsense stare. "You lost or just broke?" he asked, sizing me up. "Both," I admitted, rubbing the back of my neck. "Got ditched out on the highway. No money, no phone, nothing." Roy didn't blink. "Happens. You got a name?" "Yeah. Mike," I said, figuring it was easier to stick to the truth for now. He handed me a clipboard with a form. "Fill this out. We'll get you a bed for the night. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest." That night, I lay on a cot in a room full of snoring strangers, staring at the ceiling. My mind wouldn't shut off. Chloe's face kept popping up, her voice, her laugh. I wanted to hate her, but part of me still ached for her to show up, to say it was all a mistake. But Roy's words stuck with me. "Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest." He didn't mess around. The next morning, he sat me down with a cup of weak coffee and a plan. "You need ID to do anything. Job, bank, whatever. Takes time, but we'll start the process. Meantime, you need cash." I nodded, feeling useless. "Know anywhere hiring?" I asked. Roy smirked. "There's a diner down the street. Owner's a tough old broad named Jacqueline. Tell her I sent you." The diner was a squat little place called Jackie's, with red vinyl booths and a jukebox in the corner. Jacqueline was behind the counter, a wiry woman in her 60s with tattoos snaking up her arms and a voice like gravel. "Roy says you need work," she said, not even looking up from wiping the counter. "Yeah, I do," I replied, shifting on my feet. "Anything you got." She squinted at me, like she was trying to see through me. "Dishwasher quit yesterday. Pays crap. Hours are long. You steal from me, you're dead. Start now." I blinked, caught off guard, but nodded. "Okay, I'm in." She tossed me an apron, and just like that, I was scrubbing plates in the back, hot water soaking my hands. It wasn't much, but it was something mine. No Chloe, no friends laughing at me, just me and a stack of greasy dishes. Roy checked in later that week, helped me file for a replacement ID. "You're doing all right, Mike," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. I wasn't so sure, but I kept going. The shelter became my home, Jacqueline's diner my lifeline. I didn't call Chloe, didn't even try. Every night, I fell asleep exhausted, but it was a good kind of tired. I was starting over, from nothing, and it felt like maybe, just maybe, I could make it work. I woke up on that cot in the shelter every morning with the same ache in my back, the same buzz of snores and coughs from the other guys around me. It had been a couple of weeks since Chloe and her friends ditched me at that gas station, and I was still getting used to this new life. Scrubbing dishes at Jacqueline's diner, sleeping on a borrowed bed, wearing clothes from a donation bin. My hands were raw from the hot water and soap, but I didn't mind. It kept me busy, kept my mind off her. Roy had been a rock, helping me navigate the mess of getting a replacement ID. Takes time, he'd said, handing me a stack of forms. But you'll get there. I nodded, grateful for his gruff kindness, and kept pushing forward. The diner was my world now. Jacqueline didn't mess around. She'd bark orders from the counter, her sharp eyes catching every mistake. Move faster, Mike, we ain't got all day, she'd yell, but there was no real venom in it. I worked double shifts whenever I could, piling up cash in a little envelope I stashed under my cot. My first paycheck wasn't much, but it was enough to buy a cheap prepaid phone from the gas station down the street. I held it in my hands, the plastic still shiny, and felt a rush of something like pride. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, bought with my own money, not Chloe's, not anyone else's. I didn't need her anymore. Then the call started. I'd only had the phone a day when it buzzed in my pocket while I was elbow deep in suds. I wiped my hands on my apron and pulled it out. Chloe's number flashed on the screen. My stomach dropped. I let it ring, watching it like it might bite me, until it went to voicemail. A minute later, the notification popped up. I shouldn't have listened, but I did. Her voice came through, soft and shaky, like she'd been practicing what to say. Mike, where are you? We waited for you. It was just a joke. We're so worried. Please call me back. I stood there, staring at the sink, the water still running. Worried? They'd left me in the middle of nowhere with nothing. If they'd waited, they'd have come back by now. The phone buzzed again, Stephanie this time. I hit play on her voicemail, and her tone was totally different, all smug and casual. Come on, dude. You have to admit, it was hilarious. Call us back, all right. Hilarious. I clenched the phone so hard my knuckles went white. That's what I was to them. A punchline, a story to laugh about over drinks at the lake house. More calls came after that, a flood of them. Chloe again, then Lauren, then Stephanie, piling up with texts and voicemails. We miss you. Where'd you go? This isn't funny anymore. I scrolled through them all, my chest tight, my head spinning. Chloe's words kept echoing. Fake concern, fake tears. She didn't care. None of them did. I sat on my cot that night, the shelter quiet except for the creak of springs and the hum of the heater. The phone glowed in my hand, their messages lighting up the screen. I listened to Chloe's first one again, then Stephanie's, then one from Lauren that was just her giggling before it cut off. My thumb hovered over the call button. Part of me wanted to dial Chloe, to scream at her, to ask why she'd done this. But what would it change? She'd just laugh it off, or cry and make me feel guilty, like she always did. I'd spent years swallowing their crap, smiling through it because I thought that's what a good husband did. Not anymore. I went through the list. Chloe, Stephanie, Isla, Lauren, and blocked every single one. My fingers shook a little as I did it, but once it was done, the phone went silent. No more buzzing, no more lies. I leaned back against the wall, letting out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It felt like cutting a rope I'd been tangled in for years. They couldn't reach me now. They didn't get to decide how this ended. I did. The next day, I went back to the diner like nothing had happened, plunging my hands into the dishwater, letting the heat burn away the last of their voices in my head. Jacqueline noticed something was off, though. You're quiet today, she said, tossing me a rag to wipe down the counter. Trouble. I shrugged, not wanting to get into it. Just sorting some stuff out. She snorted. Long as it don't mess with my kitchen, sort of way. I smirked at that. She didn't care about my drama, just the job. It was refreshing. Roy checked in later, handing me a paper with a case number for my ID. Coming along, he said. You holding up? I nodded. Yeah, better than I thought. He clapped me on the shoulder and left me to it. By the end of the week, I'd saved enough to buy a second-hand jacket from the shelter's donation pile. Nothing fancy, but it kept the chill off. I walked back to my cot each night, The prepaid phone silent in my pocket and felt lighter. Chloe and her friends were gone, cut out like a bad habit. I didn't need their apologies or their excuses. I had work, a bed, a plan, small things, but they were mine. The ache was still there, sure, the sting of betrayal, but it was fading. Every dish I scrubbed, every dollar I tucked away, I was building something new, something they couldn't touch. And for the first time in a long time, I fell asleep without dreaming of her. I'd been at the diner for months now, and things were starting to feel steady. Not perfect, but steady. The shelter was still my home, but I'd saved enough to move into a tiny studio above a laundromat in Grand Junction. It wasn't much, just a single room with a lumpy mattress, a hot plate, and a bathroom so small I could barely turn around in it. But it was mine. No more cots, no more snoring strangers, just a key in my pocket and a door I could lock. Jacqueline had seen me busting my tail at the diner and bumped me up to prep cook, which meant more hours and a little more cash. I'd chop onions and peel potatoes in the back, the rhythm of the knife keeping my hands busy and my mind quiet. It was hard work, but it felt good, like I was earning something real. The nights were still tough, though. I'd lie on that creaky mattress, staring at the water stains on the ceiling, and Chloe would creep into my head. I'd see her smile, hear her laugh. Not the mean one she used with her friends, but the soft one she'd give me back when things were good, back before I became her punching bag. I'd wonder what she was doing, if she missed me, if she even cared. The loneliness hit hard sometimes, a cold weight in my chest that wouldn't go away. But then morning would come, and I'd drag myself out of bed, pull on my jacket, and head to the diner. No fear of her judgment, no cruel jabs from her friends. Just me, free to breathe, free to be. One night, after a long shift, I was messing around with my prepaid phone, bored and restless. I kept it simple, no contacts, no ties to the past, but curiosity got the better of me. I made a fake social media account, just a random name and no picture, and looked her up. Chloe's profile popped up, still public, still full of her perfect little life. There were pictures from the lake house trip, her and Stephanie posing by the water, Isla grinning with a drink in her hand. Then I saw it, a post about me. It was a photo of us from years ago, smiling at some picnic, and her caption hit me like a slap. Missing my love. I pray he finds his way back to me. I stared at it, my thumb frozen on the screen. Missing me? She hadn't even gone back for me. She'd driven off and left me to rot. I almost laughed, right there in that dingy apartment, the sound bouncing off the bare walls. It was so fake, so Chloe, turning herself into the victim, like I'd wandered off on my own instead of being abandoned. I scrolled through the comments, Stephanie saying, "He'll turn up, don't worry." Lauren chiming in with, "Sending you hugs." And my stomach turned. They were all in on it, playing this game like I was the bad guy. I clicked off the phone and tossed it onto the mattress, running my hands through my hair. She hadn't changed. None of them had. But I had. I wasn't the guy in that picnic photo anymore, the one who'd grin and take it while they tore me down. I was someone else now, someone they didn't know. The next day at the diner, I was quieter than usual, still chewing on what I'd seen. Jacqueline noticed, of course, she always did. "You look like someone kicked your dog," she said, sliding a plate of fries my way during a slow moment. I shrugged, picking at the food. "Just thinking too much." She raised an eyebrow, her tattooed arms crossed. "About what? That ex of yours?" I froze, surprised she'd guessed it. I'd never told her the whole story, just bits and pieces. "Yeah," I admitted. "Saw something online. She's acting like she's the one who got hurt." Jacqueline snorted, loud and sharp. "Sounds like a real piece of work. Good riddance, kid." I nodded, managing a small smile. She was right. Good riddance. Work kept me grounded. I'd dice vegetables, flip burgers when the cook needed a hand, wipe down counters, anything to keep moving. The diner had its regulars, folks who'd nod at me or leave a couple bucks on the table, and that felt good, like I was part of something. My hands were calloused now, my arms stronger from hauling crates and scrubbing pans. I'd catch my reflection in the diner's glass doors sometimes, tired eyes, messy hair, but a guy who was making it, one day at a time. Chloe's post faded from my mind, replaced by the clatter of plates and Jacqueline's gruff voice calling out orders. I stopped checking her social media after that. Didn't need to. Whatever she was saying, whatever story she was spinning, it didn't matter. I had my studio, my job, my life, Small, sure, but growing. The loneliness still came around, especially on quiet nights when the laundromat downstairs hummed and rattled, but it wasn't as sharp anymore. I'd wake up to the smell of detergent drifting through the floorboards, pull on my boots, and head out into the cold morning air. No one was waiting to mock me. No one was rolling their eyes at my every word. I could just be Mike, plain, simple Mike, and that was enough. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on solid ground, not sinking in quicksand. Freedom wasn't loud or flashy. It was this, my key, my paycheck, my choice. And I wasn't giving it back. I'd been living above the laundromat for a while now, settling into a routine that felt like mine. Work at the diner, save my cash, sleep in my own space. The days blended together, but they were good days, steady ones. Then she walked in, Sienna. She started coming to Jacqueline's diner twice a week, always in the same booth by the window, always with a stack of textbooks and a pen in her hand. She was a med student, I figured, from the way she'd mutter medical terms under her breath while scribbling notes. Her order never changed: Denver omelet, no tomatoes, extra coffee, and she'd barely look up when I brought it over. I'd watch her sometimes, amused at how she'd get so lost in her studying that her fork would hover halfway to her mouth for a full minute before she noticed. I don't know why I started messing with her. Maybe I was bored. Maybe I just wanted to see if she'd crack a smile. I'd swap out my name tag with random names I'd make up, Bob one day, Steve the next, Carl after that, just to see if she'd catch it. She didn't at first, too buried in her books, but one morning, I walked over with Rusty pinned to my shirt, and she finally looked up. Her eyes narrowed, flicking to the tag, then back to my face. "Your name tag is wrong," she said, her voice quiet but firm, like she was diagnosing me. I grinned, caught off guard. "Is it?" I shot back, even though it was. My real name was Mike, and she'd never asked. She smirked, just a little, and went back to her notes. That was it, our first real moment, and it stuck with me. Work kept me busy, but Sienna became the highlight of my week. She'd show up, order her usual, and I'd find excuses to swing by her table, refill her coffee, clear her plate, ask if she needed anything. She'd nod or mumble a thanks, but that smirk stayed in my head, like a challenge. One day, she came in looking frazzled, her hair messy, her books heavier than usual. "Rough night?" I asked, setting her coffee down. She sighed, rubbing her eyes. "Exams. I haven't slept in 2 days." I nodded, not pushing it, but I slipped an extra hash brown onto her plate when she wasn't looking. She noticed, glanced up at me, and said, "You're sneaky." I just shrugged. "Gotta keep you awake somehow." Our first date wasn't even planned. She came in one evening, all dressed up, jeans and a nice top, not her usual sweatshirt, and told me her friends had bailed on a reservation at some fancy pizza place across town. "I'm not wasting it," she said, half to herself, then looked at me. "You free?" I was wiping down the counter, my shift almost over, and Jacqueline was in earshot. "Go on, kid," she barked, waving me off. "You're no use to me moping around." So I went. We split a pepperoni pizza and a pitcher of soda, and she laughed, really laughed, when I told her about the name tag thing. "I knew it wasn't Rusty," she said, her eyes bright. "You're not that old." We talked all night, about her med school stress, my diner gig, dumb stuff like favorite movies. It was easy, natural, like we'd known each other forever. 6 months later, she moved into my little studio. It was cramped. Her books took up half the space, and we'd trip over each other making dinner on that tiny hot plate, but I didn't care. She'd study late, her lamp glowing while I slept, and I'd wake up to her muttering anatomy terms in her sleep. It was weirdly comforting. A year after that, we got a bigger place together, a real apartment with a kitchen and a couch that didn't smell like bleach. Sienna was different from Chloe. She didn't mock me, didn't make me feel small. When I'd doubt myself, she'd just say, "You've got this." And somehow, I'd believe her. We'd cook together, watch old TV shows, argue over who left the dishes in the sink. It was simple, but it was ours. Meanwhile, Chloe wouldn't let go. She'd started emailing me, found my address somehow, probably from an old bill or something. The first one came a few weeks after Sienna moved in, popping up on my phone while I was chopping peppers at the diner. "Mike, I just want to know you're okay," it read. "I miss you." "We all do." I stared at it, my knife hovering over the cutting board. "Miss me?" She'd left me at a gas station with nothing, laughed about it with her friends, and now she missed me? I deleted it without replying. More came after that, some short, some long, all dripping with that fake sweetness she'd mastered. I messed up, I know. Please talk to me. I saw your grandma. She's worried. I'd read them, feel that old ache in my chest, then hit delete. Sienna caught me once, frowning at my phone. Who's that? She asked. Nobody, I said, and she didn't push. She didn't need to. I wasn't going back. Life with Sienna was good, better than I'd thought I deserved. The diner was humming, my hands were steady, and Chloe's emails were just noise I could tune out. I'd built something new, something solid, and every day with Sienna proved it. She'd tease me about my cooking, I'd laugh at her terrible singing, and we'd fall asleep tangled up on that secondhand couch. Chloe could write all she wanted. I didn't know her a damn thing. My world was here now, with Sienna, and I wasn't letting go. I stood in the kitchen of Jacqueline's diner, flipping a burger on the grill, the sizzle filling the air as grease popped against my apron. Things had been good. Better than good, really. Sienna and I were settled in our new apartment, a step up from the cramped studio above the laundromat. It had a real bedroom, a stove that didn't smoke, and a window that let in actual sunlight. Life felt solid, like I'd finally climbed out of the hole Chloe and her friends had left me in. Work was steady too. I'd been at the diner long enough that Jacqueline trusted me with more than just dishes and prep. She'd started leaning on me, barking less and nodding more when I got things done right. That day, though, she called me over to the counter during a slow stretch, her sharp eyes locked on me like she had something big to say. Mike, she said, wiping her hands on a rag, you're not half bad at this. I smirked, thinking she was joking, but her face stayed serious. I'm opening a second spot across town, smaller joint, but mine. Need someone to run it. You in? I froze, spatula in hand, the burger sizzling behind me. Me? Run a diner? I'd gone from scrubbing plates to cooking, sure, but managing a whole place? You serious? I asked, my voice rougher than I meant it to be. She snorted. Do I look like I'm kidding? You've got the chops. Work hard, don't steal, don't whine. Say yes or no. My head spun. A year ago, I'd been dumped at a gas station with nothing. Now I was getting offered this. I almost said no, convinced it was some trick, like Chloe's pranks all over again. That night, I sat on our couch, Sienna's and mine, staring at the TV without really watching it. She came home from a late study session, dropping her bag by the door, and saw me just sitting there. What's up? She asked, kicking off her shoes. I told her about Jacqueline's offer, my voice low, like saying it out loud might jinx it. She wants me to run her new diner. Me in charge. Sienna plopped down next to me, her knee brushing mine. And you're thinking about turning it down? She said, reading me like always. I shrugged, rubbing my neck. I don't know. What if I screw it up? She grabbed my hand, her grip firm. You're already running that place half the time, helping with orders, fixing stuff when she's yelling at someone else. Just make it official. You've got this. Her words hit me hard, like a shove I didn't know I needed. She didn't doubt me, not for a second, and that felt new, strange, good. Chloe would have laughed, said something like, you? A boss? And her friends would have piled on. But Sienna just looked at me, steady and sure, and I nodded. Okay, I'll do it. She smiled, that small one I loved, and leaned her head on my shoulder. Good. Now stop moping. We've got dishes to do. I laughed, the weight lifting a little, and we washed plates together, her humming some off-key song while I splashed water at her. The next day, I told Jacqueline yes. She grunted, like she'd expected it, and handed me a set of keys. Don't burn it down, she said, then went back to counting cash. The new diner was a hole-in-the-wall spot. 10 tables, a counter, a kitchen barely big enough for two, but it was mine to run. I started the next week, setting up schedules, ordering supplies, cooking when the line got slammed. It was chaos at first, waitresses forgetting orders, me burning a batch of fries, but I figured it out. Sienna was right. I'd been doing this stuff already, just without the title. The place started humming, regulars trickling in, and Jacqueline even stopped by once, nodding like she approved. Not bad, kid, she said, and I felt taller than I had in years. Then Chloe's email came. I was at the new diner, checking inventory on my phone, when it popped up. Mike, your grandmother's been asking about you. Please let us know you're alive. My gut twisted. Grandma. She'd always been sweet, sending me cards even after I married Chloe. But Chloe bringing her up now? It was a cheap shot, a hook to reel me back in. I pictured her typing it, fake tears in her eyes, trying to guilt me like always. I deleted it, my thumb slamming the screen harder than it needed to. She didn't get to use grandma against me, not after what she'd done. I hadn't called home in a while, sure, but I'd fixed that myself, not through her. I threw myself into the diner after that, keeping my hands busy so my mind wouldn't wander. The place was picking up, truckers stopping by, locals chatting me up like I was one of them. I'd come home to Sienna studying at our table, her books spread out, and she'd ask how it went. Good, I'd say and mean it. We'd cook dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta or burgers, and talk about her classes, my day, the future. Chloe's emails kept coming, piling up in my trash folder, but I didn't open them. She was a ghost, a shadow I could ignore. My life was here. The diner, Sienna, the keys in my pocket. I'd been abandoned once, left to figure it out, and I had. Now I was building something better, something they couldn't touch. Every night, I locked up the diner, drove home to Sienna, and felt like a man who'd finally found his footing. I was flipping eggs in the kitchen of my third diner, the one on the edge of town, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. The morning rush was in full swing, truckers hollering for coffee, waitresses darting between tables, and I almost ignored it. 15 years had turned me into a different man. Sienna and I were married, 2 kids tearing up our house, 3 diner locations keeping me busy. Life was good, loud, full. Nothing like the empty shell I'd been when Chloe left me at that gas station. I wiped my hands on my apron, pulled out my phone, and saw it. A LinkedIn notification. Someone viewed your profile 27 times today. My stomach did a little flip. I didn't use LinkedIn much, just a basic page with my name, the diners, a blurry photo Sienna made me take. But 27 times? That wasn't normal. I tapped it open, the grill hissing behind me, and there she was, Chloe. Her name hit me like a cold splash of water, right there on the screen, tied to some company I didn't care about. 27 views in one day. She'd been digging through my life, over and over. I set the phone down, my hands gripping the counter, trying to steady myself. 15 years, and she was back, creeping in like a shadow I thought I'd shaken off. I flipped the eggs, barely watching, my mind racing. What did she want? Why now? I'd blocked her emails years ago, ignored her guilt trips, built a whole world without her. But here she was, poking around, silent but loud in my head. The diner smelled like bacon and syrup, the clatter of plates keeping me grounded. I plated the eggs, handed them off to a waitress, and tried to focus. Coffee needed refilling, hash browns were burning, but Chloe's name stuck with me. I pictured her sitting somewhere, clicking my profile, seeing the diners, maybe even the old job at Jacqueline's I'd listed. Did she know about Sienna? The kids? I hadn't posted much, just enough to look legit, but 27 views meant she was looking hard. I wiped my forehead, sweat mixing with the heat, and grabbed my phone again. Her profile stared back. Chloe, older now, hair cut short, a tight smile in her picture. Consultant, it said. I didn't read more. Didn't want to. I stepped into the back, a tiny storeroom with shelves of flour and canned goods, and leaned against the wall. My heart was thumping too fast, like I'd run a mile. 15 years, 2 kids, a wife, a business, and she could still rattle me. I hated that. I'd worked so hard to bury her, to forget the gas station, the laughter, the way she'd made me feel like nothing. Now she was back, not even saying anything, just watching. Was she jealous? Mad? Desperate? I ran my hands through my hair, pacing the cramped space. Part of me wanted to message her, "What's your deal?" But I stopped myself. That's what she'd want. Me reaching out, giving her a crack to slip through. I went back to the grill, threw myself into the rush, cooking, pouring, wiping down tables when the waitresses got swamped. The regulars nodded at me. Some guy asked for extra ketchup, and I kept moving, kept my hands busy. But she was there, in the back of my mind, those 27 views like an itch I couldn't scratch. I didn't tell Sienna when I got home that night. She was on the couch, folding laundry, the kids upstairs yelling about some game. Busy day? She asked, glancing up. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile, kissing her forehead. Same old. She didn't push, just handed me a pile of socks to sort, and I sat there, folding, pretending everything was fine. The house was warm, Smelled like dinner. Chicken and rice, Sienna's go-to, and the kids tumbled down, begging for dessert. I laughed, said no, felt normal for a minute. But Chloe lingered, a ghost I couldn't shake. I didn't check LinkedIn again, didn't need to see if she'd looked more. 27 was enough. I helped Sienna with the dishes, her hip bumping mine, and tried to let it go. My life was here, 2 kids fighting over the last cookie, a wife who didn't laugh at me, diners I'd built from nothing. Chloe couldn't touch that, not really. Still, I went to bed with her name in my head, staring at the ceiling while Sienna slept beside me. The next day, I was at the first diner, pouring coffee, when my phone buzzed again. I didn't look, just shoved it deeper in my pocket. If it was her, I didn't want to know. I'd spent years locking her out, and now she was knocking, quiet but steady. I focused on the work, grill, counter, cash register, kept my hands moving, my voice steady. She was out there, somewhere, but I was here, standing tall. Whatever she wanted, whatever game she was playing, I wasn't biting. Not yet. Not ever, if I could help it. I was wiping down the counter at the original diner, the one Jacqueline first hired me for, when the door jingled and they walked in, Chloe, Stephanie, and Isla. It was 3 days after those LinkedIn alerts, and I'd been on edge, half expecting something like this. The breakfast rush had just died down, leaving a handful of regulars sipping coffee, the air thick with grease and burnt toast. I saw them before they saw me. Chloe's short hair catching the light, Stephanie's swagger still there. Isla hunched like she wanted to disappear. My gut twisted, hands freezing on the rack. 15 years since they ditched me at that gas station, and now they were here, in my diner, my turf. I didn't move, just watched them pick a booth by the window and sit, their voices low but familiar. I could have stayed back, let the waitress handle it, but something pulled me out there. Maybe anger, maybe just needing to see it through. I grabbed a pot of coffee, more for something to hold than anything else, and walked over. Chloe spotted me first, her eyes going wide, her mouth dropping open. "Oh my God, it's you," she said, her voice shaky, like she hadn't rehearsed it. Stephanie leaned back, smirking like always. "Hey, look at you, big shot." Isla glanced up, then down fast, her hands fidgeting with the menu. I stood there, coffee pot in hand, looking at them. Older, worn, desperate in a way I didn't expect. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping it short, my voice harder than I felt. Chloe shifted, leaning forward, her fingers twisting together. "Mike, can we talk? Please." I didn't sit, didn't soften. "I'm working. Talk." She swallowed, glancing at Stephanie for backup, then started. We need your help." It spilled out. Her life had crashed. Her artsy little business went under. Her marriage, some guy I didn't know, fell apart, and she was broke, begging now. Stephanie jumped in, casual like it was no big deal. "You're doing all right? 3 diners? We just need a hand, for old times." Isla nodded, barely audible. "Just a little help." I listened, letting it sink in. Chloe's sob story, Stephanie's charm, Isla's guilt. They'd planned this, tracked me down, thought I'd roll over. I stood there, coffee pot still hot in my grip, watching them squirm. Chloe's eyes got wet, Stephanie's smirk twitched, Isla shredded the edge of her menu. I remembered her LinkedIn stalking, 27 views, then showing up here, thinking I'd cave because I used to. "Wait here," I said, turning away. I walked to the office, a cramped box with a desk and a stack of receipts, my boots heavy on the floor. They wanted money. After leaving me with nothing, laughing about it, they thought I'd just hand it over. I sat down, the chair creaking, and stared at the wall. My hands shook a little, not from fear, from anger. I could have yelled, thrown them out, but I didn't. I grabbed an envelope, wrote a check, and headed back. They were still there, whispering, heads snapping up when I walked over. I dropped the envelope in front of Chloe, watching her fingers snatch it up, her face lighting up for a second. She opened it. $73.50, the exact cost of a Greyhound ticket from Grand Junction back home, 15 years ago. Her smile crashed, her breath catching. Stephanie grabbed it, glaring. "What the hell is this?" she snapped. I leaned in, my voice low, steady. "That's what it would have cost me to get back to you that day. I didn't. You don't get more than that." Chloe's mouth opened, no sound coming out. Stephanie shoved the check at me. "You're a jerk, Mike. After everything." I cut her off. "After everything? You left me. You laughed. This is me being generous." Isla flinched, her hands balling up, but she didn't speak. I straightened, looking at them. Chloe pale, Stephanie fuming, Isla shrinking. "It's time to leave," I said, loud enough for the diner to hear. "Don't come back." I turned, walked to the counter, my heart pounding but my steps sure. The waitress hovered, unsure, but I waved her off. "They're done," I said, grabbing a rag to wipe my hands. They sat there a minute, stunned, then scrambled up, Chloe shoving the envelope in her purse, Stephanie muttering, Isla trailing behind. The door jingled shut, and the diner went back to normal, coffee pouring, forks clinking, like they'd never been there. I stood behind the counter, pouring myself a cup, my hands steady now. They'd come begging, thinking I'd bend, and I'd shut them down. It wasn't loud or messy, just cold, final. I sipped the coffee, bitter on my tongue, and watched the regulars chat, oblivious. Chloe's tears, Stephanie's anger, they didn't matter. I'd given them what they'd given me, just enough to walk away. The diner hummed around me, my diner, my life, and they were gone. I finished my shift, locked up, and drove home, the weight lifting with every mile. They'd tried, and they'd lost. That was it. I leaned against the diner's front window, the glass cold against my arm, watching Chloe, Stephanie, and Isla out in the parking lot. They'd just stormed out after I handed them that $73.50 check. Bus fare from Grand Junction, nothing more. And now they were at it, arguing like kids caught stealing. Stephanie was loud, her hands slashing the air, her face twisted up like she wanted to hit something. Chloe stood there, the envelope crumpled in her fist, staring at the ground, her shoulders hunched. Isla hung back, her arms crossed tight, looking like she might bolt or cry. Maybe both. I couldn't hear them through the window, but I didn't need to. They'd come in begging, thinking I'd cave, and I'd sent them packing. Now they were unraveling, and I just watched, feeling nothing. The sun was low, painting the lot orange, their shadows stretching long across the gravel. Stephanie jabbed a finger at Chloe, her mouth moving fast, probably blaming her for dragging them here, for screwing it up. Chloe shook her head, slow and tired, then shoved the check into her purse like it was trash. Isla shifted, glancing at the diner, her eyes catching mine for a second before darting away. I didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, my coffee mug cooling on the counter behind me. They could fight all day out there. It didn't touch me. I'd given them what they deserved, closed the book on 15 years of their garbage, and that was that. I turned away, grabbing the mug and taking a sip. Cold now, bitter, but I didn't care. The diner was quiet, just a couple of regulars lingering over pie, the jukebox humming some old tune. I wiped down the counter, slow and steady, letting the rag soak up the day. The waitresses buzzed around, clearing tables, shooting me quick looks but keeping their mouths shut. They knew something had happened. Those three walking in, me walking out with that envelope, but I didn't explain. "You good, Mike?" one asked, stacking plates. "Yeah," I said, short and sharp, and went back to wiping. I didn't want their questions, didn't want to drag it out. Chloe and her crew were gone, and I was done. Driving home, the truck's engine growled under me, the road dark except for my headlights cutting through. My hands gripped the wheel, my mind stuck on that scene. Chloe's face when she saw the check, Stephanie's snarl, Isla's silence. It should have felt good, shutting them down, and it did, mostly. But there was this itch, a little nag I couldn't shake. They'd looked desperate, broken, Chloe especially, with her sob story about her life falling apart. 15 years ago, I'd have cared, run after them, tried to fix it. Now, I just watched them leave. The house came into view, lights on, Sienna's car in the drive, and I let out a breath. This was real, my family, my life, not them. I walked in, kicking my boots off by the door, the smell of leftover lasagna hitting me. Sienna was at the kitchen table, papers spread out, a pen in her hand, grading again, probably. The kids were upstairs, their voices muffled, likely in bed but not asleep. She looked up, her glasses low on her nose. "Hey," she said, soft, then tilted her head. "You okay?" I nodded, pulling out a chair and sitting across from her, my hands flat on the table. "They came by," I said, keeping it simple. Her eyebrows lifted, but she waited. Chloe, Stephanie, Isla asked for money. I gave them bus fare and told them to go. She set her pen down, leaning back, her eyes steady on mine. "Bus fare?" she asked, a little smile tugging her lips. I told her, $73.50, the exact cost to get back from Grand Junction all those years ago. How Chloe's face fell, how Stephanie snapped, how I walked away. Sienna listened, her hand resting on the table, calm like always. When I finished, she reached over, her fingers brushing mine. They can't take anything from you that you don't give them, she said, her voice firm, quiet. I looked at her, those words sinking in, and nodded. Yeah, I said, my throat tight. She squeezed my hand, then went back to her papers, leaving me sitting there, the weight lifting a little. She didn't need to say more. She got it, got me, and that was enough. We ate leftovers later, just the two of us, the kids finally quiet upstairs. I poked at the lasagna, my head still half in the parking lot, Stephanie yelling, Chloe staring, Isla shrinking. It didn't matter what they said out there, who they blamed. They'd come for a handout, and I'd given them a mirror instead. Sienna didn't ask more, just talked about the kids, our son's math test, our daughter's new obsession with drawing cats. I smiled, nodded, let her pull me back to now. After, we cleaned up, her hip bumping mine at the sink, and I felt steady again. That night, lying in bed, Sienna's breathing slow beside me, I stared at the ceiling. The house creaked, the kids shifting in their rooms, and I replayed it. Those three in my diner, then out in the lot, falling apart. They couldn't touch this, my family, my diners, me. I'd shut the door, locked it tight, and they were on the other side, where they belonged. The itch was still there, faint, but fading. Sienna was right. They got nothing I didn't give, and I'd given them the end. I closed my eyes, the days slipping away, and slept hard, done with their ghosts for good. I stood in the kitchen of our house, stirring a pot of chili on the stove, the smell of spices filling the air. It had been weeks since Chloe, Stephanie, and Isla walked into my diner, since I handed them that $73.50 check and watched them argue in the parking lot. I hadn't seen them since, not a call, not an email, not even a whisper on LinkedIn. They were gone, really gone this time, and I felt it, a quiet that settled deep, like a storm finally passing. Life rolled on. Sienna grading papers at the table, the kids chasing each other around the backyard, the diners humming with regulars. It was mine, all of it, and they couldn't touch it. I'd stopped looking over my shoulder, stopped waiting for the next knock. The chili bubbled, steam rising, and I tasted it. Needed more salt, maybe a kick of pepper. Sienna glanced up from her stack of tests, her glasses slipping down her nose. Smells good, she said, smiling that small smile I loved. Better be. I shot back, grinning, and she laughed, soft and easy. The kids burst in from outside, our son waving a muddy stick, our daughter yelling about a bug she'd found. Out, both of you, wash up. I barked, pointing to the sink, and they groaned but obeyed, splashing water everywhere. It was chaos, loud and messy, but it was ours. Chloe's face, those tears she'd tried to sell me, faded a little more every day, replaced by this. Work was good too. I bounced between the three diners, flipping burgers, checking stock, joking with the waitresses. The regulars knew me now. Old Tom with his coffee, the trucker who tipped big, the lady who always asked for extra napkins. They'd nod, say, "Hey, Mike," and I'd nod back, feeling like I belonged. Jacqueline stopped by the first diner one morning. Her tattoos faded, but her glare still sharp. "You didn't screw it up," she said, looking around, then clapped my shoulder and left. High praise from her. I laughed to myself, pouring coffee for a table, and thought about how far I'd come, from a gas station nobody to this. I didn't check on Chloe anymore. No fake social media accounts, no late-night scrolls. I'd done that once, years back, seen her play the grieving widow, but now? I didn't need to know. She was out there, somewhere, living whatever life she'd made after her business tanked, her marriage crumbled. Stephanie and Isla too, maybe still mad, maybe still blaming her. It didn't matter. They'd come begging, and I'd shut the door. That $73.50 check was the last thing I'd ever give them. Just enough to walk away, like they'd left me to do. I didn't feel bad, didn't feel guilty. I felt free. Sienna and I took the kids to the park that weekend, a crisp fall day with leaves crunching under our boots. Our son ran ahead, kicking a ball, while our daughter clung to my hand, pointing at every squirrel. Sienna walked beside me, her arm brushing mine, and we didn't say much, just watched, breathed, lived. I thought about Chloe for a second, her showing up, her voice cracking, and let it go. She couldn't take this from me, couldn't even come close. I'd built it all without her, despite her, and it was better than anything she'd ever offered. You're quiet, Sienna said, nudging me. Just happy, I replied, and she squeezed my hand, knowing I meant it. Back home, we ate the chili, too spicy, the kids complained, but they shoveled it down anyway. I sat at the table, watching them bicker over the last roll, Sienna rolling her eyes at their noise. This was it, the best revenge, if you could call it that. Not some big fight, not rubbing it in their faces, just living well, living real. Chloe wanted me to break, to crawl back, and I hadn't. I'd walked away from that gas station, from her, and kept going. Roy at the shelter, Jacqueline's diner, Sienna's laugh, these kids. Every step was mine, every piece earned. They'd lost, not because I'd beaten them, but because I'd stopped playing their game. The days kept rolling, school runs, diner shifts, quiet nights with Sienna on the couch. I didn't look back, didn't need to. Chloe was a memory, a shadow that couldn't reach me anymore. I'd see her sometimes, in a flash, her smirk, her tears, but it didn't stick. I'd turn the radio up, flip a burger, hug my daughter, and she'd fade. The diners thrived, the kids grew, Sienna and I argued over dumb stuff like whose turn it was to mow the lawn. It was simple, messy, perfect. I'd wake up early, make coffee, stand in our kitchen looking out at the yard, and feel it. Peace, deep and steady. One night, after the kids were in bed, I sat on the porch, a beer in my hand, the air cool against my skin. Sienna came out, wrapped in a blanket, and sat beside me. "What's on your mind?" she asked, her voice soft. I took a sip, staring at the stars. "Nothing," I said, then smiled. "Everything." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat there, quiet, together. Chloe was gone, really gone, and I was here whole. The best revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was this, right now, a life so good I didn't need to prove anything. I'd made it, and that was enough. Elle will never forget the day my world crumbled. It started like any other. A mundane Tuesday filled with work emails, Jason's half-hearted attempts at homework, and the familiar hum of a coffee maker in the background. Nothing seemed off. Nothing warned me of the storm brewing in the distance. If I'd known, maybe I would have done something differently, though in hindsight, I doubt it. Some disasters are inevitable. I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through bills on my laptop, when the notification popped up. "Your balance has fallen below the minimum threshold," it read. That was odd. The college fund had more than enough in it. 6 years of careful saving for Jason's future. Laura and I had both agreed it was untouchable. It wasn't a conversation we needed to revisit because we both knew how much it meant. Or so I thought. I logged into the account, expecting to see some sort of mistake. Maybe a glitch? Banks mess up all the time, right? But no, the truth hit me like a freight train. The account was empty. Not low balance empty, but $0, 0 cents, no transactions in sight. I stared at the screen, the numbers burning into my eyes, hoping, praying. It was a joke, but it wasn't. "Laura," I called, my voice shaky. No response. "Laura." I tried again, louder this time, but the silence that answered was deafening. She wasn't home. That's when the sinking realization crept in. Laura had been acting strange for weeks. A little distant, a little too dressed up for her errands. Brushing off questions about where she was going with vague excuses. I chalked it up to stress, life, whatever. Never once had I thought. I grabbed my phone and dialed her number. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. My heart was pounding now, every beat thudding in my chest like a drum. Jason wandered into the room, munching on an apple, oblivious to the chaos unraveling before him. "Where's Mom?" I asked, trying to sound calm for his sake. He shrugged, taking another bite. "She said she had to go somewhere." Somewhere. That word felt like a dagger twisting in my gut. My hands were shaking as I opened our joint credit card account. Maybe I didn't want to see what I already suspected, but I couldn't stop myself. And there it was, transaction after transaction. Flights, luxury hotels, high-end restaurants. My wife was halfway across the country, living it up on money meant for our son's future. I didn't want Jason to see me fall apart, but it was hard. My mind raced with questions. How could she do this? How could she take from our son? From the one person who had nothing to do with our issues? Sure, we'd been arguing lately. Sure, things hadn't been perfect. But this was unforgivable. Jason must have noticed the look on my face because he came over and put a hand on my shoulder. "Dad, it's fine," he said with a smile that was too calm, too knowing. I fixed everything. At the time, I thought he was just trying to make me feel better. Kids don't understand the weight of betrayal, the depth of loss. They see things in black and white, good guys and bad guys, problems and solutions. I wanted to believe his words were innocent. But even then, something about his tone felt off, like he knew more than he was letting on. I didn't have the energy to press him. My focus was on Laura. I tried calling again, but it was useless. It wasn't until later that night, when I checked the closet and saw her suitcase missing, that the truth hit me in full force. She wasn't coming back. She had emptied the account, packed her bags, and walked out on her family. On me. On Jason. The anger came in waves, each one more intense than the last. I wasn't just furious at her. I was furious at myself. How could I have missed the signs? How could I have let this happen under my nose? Every transaction, every lie, played on repeat in my mind like a cruel movie I couldn't turn off. Jason stayed quiet most of the evening, watching me with that same calm expression. When he finally went to bed, I sat alone in the dark, replaying the last few months, trying to find answers. But there weren't any. There was just a gaping hole where trust used to be, and a betrayal so deep it threatened to swallow me whole. I'd like to say I found some clarity that night, some resolve to move forward, but I didn't. All I found was the cold, bitter truth. The woman I loved had chosen herself over her family, and there was no coming back from that. What I didn't know, as I sat there drowning in my grief, was that Jason had already started working on a solution, one I couldn't have imagined in my wildest dreams. The days following Laura's betrayal were a blur. I was barely functional, running on autopilot, consumed by anger, confusion, and heartbreak. But Jason? Jason was unshaken. If anything, he was eerily composed for a 10-year-old whose mother had just abandoned him. He still went to school, still did his homework, still played with his Legos like nothing had changed. At first, I chalked it up to shock. Kids process trauma differently, right? But the truth was, Jason wasn't ignoring the situation. He was working on it. It started small. I'd catch him typing furiously on his tablet, his face scrunched up in concentration. He'd glance at me and quickly minimize the screen, brushing it off with a casual, "Just homework, Dad." I didn't think much of it at the time. After all, he'd always been a whiz with technology, coding, gaming, whatever. It was his thing. But then there were the whispered phone calls. "Who are you talking to?" I asked one evening, catching him in the kitchen with the phone pressed to his ear. He looked startled, like a deer caught in headlights. Nobody," he said, shoving the phone into his pocket and hurrying out of the room. I didn't press him. I figured he was talking to a friend, or maybe even a counselor from school. Everyone handles grief differently, I told myself. Maybe this was his way of coping. Then there was the garage. Jason started spending hours in there, tinkering with tools and wires. I didn't pay much attention at first. I assumed he was working on one of his little engineering projects. He'd always been good at building things. Robots, model planes, stuff like that. But one night, curiosity got the better of me. I wandered into the garage to see what he was up to, and what I found stopped me cold. There was a whiteboard covered in diagrams, equations, and flowcharts. It looked like something out of a spy movie. Next to it was a laptop with lines of code scrolling across the screen. Jason was sitting at the workbench, soldering something that looked suspiciously like a listening device. When he saw me, he jumped up, trying to block the whiteboard with his small frame. "What's all this?" I asked, genuinely baffled. "Nothing, Dad. Just a project for school," he said, too quickly, too defensively. I raised an eyebrow. A school project? Since when does fourth grade require surveillance equipment? Jason's face turned red, and for a moment, I thought he might actually confess. But then he just shrugged and muttered, "You wouldn't get it, before packing up his tools and heading back inside. I stood there, staring at the whiteboard, my head spinning. Whatever Jason was working on, it wasn't for school, and it wasn't just a hobby. As the days went on, the strange behavior only escalated. Jason started asking oddly specific questions about Laura's finances. Did she have other accounts? Did I know her passwords? Did she ever talk about offshore investments? At first, I thought he was just being curious, but then I realized he was gathering information. Why do you want to know all this? I asked one evening. Jason shrugged, not looking up from his tablet. No reason. Just wondering. Jason, I said, my voice firm, this isn't normal. If something's bothering you, you need to tell me. He finally looked up, his expression unreadable. I told you, Dad. I'm fixing it. You'll see. That night, I couldn't sleep. Jason's words kept echoing in my mind. Fixing it? What could he possibly mean by that? I thought about confronting him, demanding answers, but something held me back. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was a small, irrational part of me that trusted him. Trusted that he really did know what he was doing. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen, typing away on his laptop. He didn't even notice me standing there, watching him. His fingers flew across the keyboard with the kind of confidence that didn't belong to a 10-year-old. Jason, I said softly, and he froze. Yeah, Dad. I wanted to ask him what he was doing, what he was planning, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I just said, breakfast is ready, and walked away. Looking back, I should have pressed him harder. I should have demanded to know what he was up to, but part of me didn't want to know. Part of me was afraid of what I might find out. Over the next few days, Jason's behavior became more secretive. He stopped leaving his tablet unattended. He locked the garage whenever he was working. He even started covering the whiteboard with a sheet when he wasn't using it. And then, just as I was starting to convince myself that it was all harmless, Laura called. It was late afternoon when my phone rang. I was standing by the kitchen sink, staring blankly out the window, still trying to piece my life back together. Jason was in the living room, playing on his tablet, completely immersed as usual. I glanced at the caller ID and froze. Laura. My first instinct was to let it ring. Why should I answer? What could she possibly say to justify what she'd done? But curiosity got the better of me, and against my better judgment, I picked up. What do you want? My voice was cold, sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. Alex, she cried, her voice frantic and trembling. Oh my God, Alex, you have to help me. Help her? The audacity of her request made my blood boil. Help you? I spat. You emptied our son's college fund and ran off with your boyfriend. Why on earth would I help you? Alex, please, just listen to me, she begged, her voice cracking. Something's gone wrong. Everything's gone wrong. I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge to steady myself. What are you talking about? It's Damien, she said, almost sobbing now. He's gone. Just disappeared. All his accounts are frozen, and so are mine. I can't access anything, Alex. Nothing. And now the police are looking for me. Her words hit me like a slap, but it wasn't sympathy I felt. It was satisfaction. Cold, hard satisfaction. I wanted to ask her how it felt to be stranded, powerless, abandoned, the way she'd left Jason and me. But I stayed silent, letting her dig her own grave. Alex, please, she continued, her desperation growing. I don't know what's happening. I don't know who did this, but I need your help. I'm stuck in Miami with no money, no ID, nothing. Damien said he'd take care of everything, and now he's just gone. Sounds like a real stand-up guy, I said dryly, unable to resist the jab. She didn't even acknowledge it, too consumed by her panic. I swear, Alex, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You just what, Laura? I snapped, my anger finally boiling over. You just stole from your own son? You just walked out on your family for some guy who clearly doesn't give a damn about you? Is that what you didn't mean to happen? There was a long pause on the other end, broken only by the sound of her shaky breathing. I made a mistake, she whispered. A mistake? I barked out a bitter laugh. You don't get to call this a mistake, Laura. You made a choice, a selfish, cruel choice, and now you're paying for it. Alex, please, she said again, her voice barely audible. I have nothing. I don't know what to do. I need you. I opened my mouth to reply, but before I could, Jason appeared in the doorway, holding his tablet. Who's on the phone? He asked, his tone casual, as if this were any other day. I covered the receiver and whispered, It's your mom. Jason's face darkened for a brief moment, but then that same calm, knowing smile spread across his lips. Put it on speaker, he said. Jason, trust me, Dad. Put it on speaker. Something in his tone made me hesitate. This wasn't a request. It was a command. I didn't understand why, but I found myself obeying. I pressed the speaker button and set the phone down on the counter. Laura, I said, my voice hardening, you're on speaker now. Jason's here. There was a sharp intake of breath on her end. Jason, she said, her voice softening. Sweetheart, it's Mommy. Save it, Jason interrupted, his tone cold and emotionless. I don't want to hear it. Jason, please, she pleaded. I know I hurt you. I know I made a mistake, but… You didn't just make a mistake, he said, cutting her off again. You betrayed us. You stole my future. And now you're calling us because you want our help? That's pathetic. I stared at him, stunned. This wasn't the voice of a 10-year-old. This was the voice of someone older, someone wiser, someone darker. Jason, Laura whispered, her voice breaking. I'm your mother. I love you. I didn't mean… You don't love me, he said bluntly. If you did, you wouldn't have left. You wouldn't have stolen from me. You chose Damien over us, and now you're paying the price. I don't feel sorry for you. You deserve this. Jason, please, she sobbed. I'm begging you. Please help me. He smiled then, a chilling, confident smile that sent a shiver down my spine. Don't worry, Mom, he said. I already did. What? She asked, her voice laced with confusion. Let's just say, he replied, his tone almost gleeful, Damien won't be around to hurt anyone anymore. And neither will you. The line went dead. I stood there, staring at Jason, my mind racing. What did you do? I whispered. He looked up at me, his eyes calm, almost proud. I told you, Dad, he said. I fixed everything. When Jason uttered those words, I fixed everything. I didn't know whether to feel proud, horrified, or completely confused. My 10-year-old son, standing there with that unnerving calmness, had just silenced his panicking mother with a cryptic remark that left me more unsettled than ever. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more absurd than the last. What could he have done? He's just a kid, right? Jason, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What do you mean? You fixed everything. What did you do? He shrugged casually, as if we were discussing his math homework. It's like I said, Dad. Mom and Damien can't hurt us anymore. I felt my stomach twist into a knot. Jason, this isn't a game. You need to tell me exactly what you've done. He sighed, like a parent indulging a child's endless questions, and motioned for me to follow him into the living room. Okay, fine. I'll show you. We sat down on the couch, and he opened his tablet. The screen lit up with a dizzying array of charts, bank statements, and what looked like coding scripts. My pulse quickened as he started explaining, his voice calm and methodical, as if he were presenting a science project. Remember how Mom drained my college fund, he began. Well, I figured if she could take the money, I could take it back. I stared at him, speechless, as he pulled up a series of bank transactions. Sure enough, the $50,000 Laura had stolen was back in the account. Not just sitting there, but reorganized and invested in a way that made my head spin. How did you? I stammered. Easy, he said, as if hacking into bank accounts was as simple as tying his shoes. Mom wasn't exactly careful with her passwords. I just used the ones she saved on her phone to access her accounts. Damien's, too. He wasn't any smarter. Once I was in, I transferred the money back to where it belongs. That's illegal, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. He shrugged again. So is stealing from your kid. I couldn't argue with that, but my unease deepened as he continued scrolling. The bank transfers were just the beginning. Jason had done more. Much more. Damien had a bunch of accounts in his name, Jason said, pointing to the screen. Turns out, he's been scamming people for years. Fake investments, shell companies, stuff like that. I reported everything to the authorities. Gave them all the evidence they need to lock him up for good. You reported him? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Yep. I even made sure the trail led back to Mom, too, he added, with a smirk that chilled me to the bone. She helped him spin the money, so technically, she's part of the scam. Now the police are watching her, too. Jason, do you understand what you've done? I said, my voice rising. This isn't just about getting the money back. You've put your mother in serious trouble. She put herself in trouble, he shot back, his tone sharper now. She chose Damien over us. She chose herself over us. Why should I feel sorry for her? I didn't know how to respond. He was right, of course. Laura had betrayed us in the worst possible way. But hearing those words come from my son, delivered with such icy detachment, made my chest ache. This wasn't just a 10-year-old taking a stand. This was something darker. And Damien? I asked, dreading the answer. What do you mean? He won't be around anymore? Jason grinned. Oh, don't worry. He's fine for now. He just doesn't have any money or anywhere to hide. The authorities froze all his accounts. By the time they find him, he'll be broke and in jail. The casual way he said it, as if destroying a man's life was no different than squashing a bug, sent a shiver down my spine. Jason, I said, choosing my words carefully, why didn't you tell me about this before? Why didn't you let me handle it? He looked up at me, his expression suddenly softer. Because I knew you wouldn't do anything. You just let her get away with it because you're too nice. Someone had to stop her, Dad. Someone had to protect us. I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. My son, my sweet, brilliant boy, had taken it upon himself to not just fix our situation, but to exact revenge in a way I couldn't have dreamed of. I didn't know whether to be proud of his resourcefulness or terrified of what it meant. Jason, I said after a long pause, I'm not sure this is the right way to handle things. He tilted his head, his calm demeanor never wavering. Maybe not, but it worked. I leaned back on the couch, running a hand through my hair. I didn't know what to say, what to feel. My son had done what I couldn't, taken control of a hopeless situation and turned it on its head. But at what cost? Jason closed his tablet and looked at me with that same unnerving confidence. Don't worry, Dad, he said. Everything's going to be okay now. But as I sat there, staring at him, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were far from okay. I didn't sleep much after Jason's revelation. How could I? The sheer magnitude of what he'd done kept replaying in my mind, like a movie stuck on an endless loop. My son, a 10-year-old, had engineered a scheme so intricate, so devastating, that it left a grown man and woman completely ruined. And the worst part? He didn't seem to feel the slightest shred of guilt about it. I told myself I'd talk to him in the morning, but life had other plans. The phone rang again, Laura. My first instinct was to ignore it. After all, what could she possibly say that would change anything? But a small, masochistic part of me wanted to hear her squirm. So I answered. What? I barked, not bothering with pleasantries. Alex, please, she sobbed. I need your help. I'm begging you. The sound of her voice was almost unrecognizable. Gone was the confident, self-assured woman who had waltzed out of our lives without a second thought. In her place was someone desperate, broken. You've got some nerve calling me, I said coldly. Alex, listen to me, she said, her words tumbling out in a frantic rush. The police are after me. They froze all my accounts. Damien's gone, just vanished. I don't even know where he is. I'm stuck, Alex. I don't have any money. I don't have anywhere to go. And whose fault is that? I cut in, my voice rising. Alex, please, she cried. I know I messed up, okay? I know I hurt you and Jason, but I didn't deserve this. I don't deserve to be left with nothing. I let out a bitter laugh. You emptied our son's college fund, ran off with your boyfriend, and now you're crying because the consequences caught up to you? You do deserve this, Laura. Every last bit of it. There was silence on the other end, broken only by her shaky breathing. I didn't think it would get this bad, she whispered. You didn't think at all, I snapped. You were too busy living it up with Damien to care about what you left behind. Well, guess what, Laura? You made your bed. Now you get to lie in it. She started sobbing then, loud and uncontrollable. Alex, I'm begging you. Please, just help me get out of this mess. I don't have anyone else to turn to. I felt my jaw tighten. Anyone else to turn to? The sheer audacity of that statement made my blood boil. After everything she'd done, she had the gall to act like a victim, like I owed her anything. There's nothing I can do for you, I said flatly. Don't say that, she pleaded. You can talk to the police, tell them it was all Damien's fault. Because lying to cover for you worked out so well the first time, I said, cutting her off. No, Laura, I'm done cleaning up your messes. Alex, please, she shouted, her voice breaking. If not for me, then for Jason. Do it for him. That was the last straw. Don't you dare bring Jason into this, I said, my voice dangerously low. You don't get to play the concerned mother now, not after what you did to him. You made it perfectly clear where your priorities lie, and they weren't with your family. Alex, I'm sorry, she cried. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I just wanted to be happy. Happy? I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. You think stealing from your son and running off with some loser was going to make you happy? Well, congratulations, Laura. You got what you wanted, and now you can deal with the consequences. There was another long silence, and for a moment, I thought she'd hung up. But then she spoke again, her voice small and broken. Is this really how it's going to be? She asked. You're just going to abandon me like this? The sheer irony of her words almost made me laugh. You abandoned us first, I said simply. And no, Laura, I'm not abandoning you. I'm just letting you deal with the mess you created. Goodbye. I hung up before she could say another word. When I turned around, Jason was standing in the doorway, watching me with that same calm, calculating expression. You didn't let her off the hook, did you? He asked. No, I said, my voice heavy with exhaustion. I didn't. He nodded, as if that was the only acceptable answer. Good. She doesn't deserve our help. I wanted to tell him that it wasn't that simple, that no matter how much I hated Laura for what she'd done, a part of me still struggled with the idea of leaving her to fend for herself. But looking at Jason, at the steely resolve in his eyes, I knew he wouldn't understand. Or maybe he would, and that scared me even more. Jason, I said carefully, what you did, what you're doing, it's not normal. This isn't how a 10-year-old is supposed to think. I'm not a normal 10-year-old, he said bluntly. I didn't have an answer to that. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that people like Damien don't just roll over when they're cornered. They lash out. They make noise. They take down as many people as they can on the way down. That's exactly what happened next. It started with a phone call. Not from Laura this time. No, I blocked her number. This one came from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I picked up, thinking maybe it was the authorities finally catching up to Damien. Alex, the voice growled on the other end. Low, dangerous, and filled with venom. You think you're so clever, don't you? I froze. Damien, I said, my voice flat. Shouldn't you be in hiding by now? He let out a humorless laugh. Oh, I'm in hiding, all right. Thanks to you and your little brat. You think you can ruin my life and just walk away? I glanced toward the living room where Jason was sitting on the floor, calmly assembling a model car as if nothing in the world could touch him. For a moment, I considered denying everything, playing dumb. But what was the point? Damien already knew. You got what you deserved, I said, keeping my tone even. You stole from my family. You didn't think there'd be consequences? You don't know who you're dealing with, he snarled. You think this is over? It's not over. Not by a long shot. What are you going to do, Damien? I asked, my patience wearing thin. You're broke. You're wanted. You're finished. Maybe, he said, his voice chillingly calm. But I'm not going down alone. I know where you live, Alex. I know where your son goes to school. And if you think I'm just going to sit back and let you ruin me, you're dead wrong. My blood ran cold. He wasn't bluffing. Damien was many things. A liar, a thief, a coward. But he wasn't the kind of man to make empty threats. "You stay away from my son," I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. "Or what?" he taunted. "You gonna sick your little hacker on me again? Go ahead. Let's see how far he's willing to go." I hung up before he could say another word. My hands were trembling as I set the phone down on the counter. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at it, trying to process what had just happened. "Who was that?" Jason asked, his voice startlingly calm. "Damien," I said, turning to face him. "He knows what you did, and now he's threatening us." Jason didn't even flinch. "Let him try," he said, his tone so cold it sent a shiver down my spine. "Jason, this isn't a game," I said, kneeling down in front of him. "This man is dangerous. We need to call the police." "No," Jason interrupted, his voice firm. "The police won't do anything until it's too late. But I can handle this." "Jason." "Dad," he said, cutting me off again. "Trust me. I've got this." I wanted to argue, to tell him that this was too much for a 10-year-old to handle, that it wasn't his job to protect us. But the look in his eyes stopped me. It wasn't the look of a scared child. It was the look of someone who had already made up his mind. That night, Jason disappeared into the garage again, locking the door behind him. I didn't have the energy to stop him. I stayed up, pacing the living room, replaying Damien's words over and over in my head. Every noise outside made me jump. Every shadow felt like a threat. It wasn't until well past midnight that Jason finally emerged. He looked tired but satisfied, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "It's done," he said simply. "What's done?" I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. He handed me his tablet, and my heart sank as I read the screen. He'd tracked Damien's location using some kind of GPS spoofing software. Not only that, but he'd hacked into Damien's burner phone, recording every threatening message he'd sent. And then, to top it all off, Jason had sent an anonymous tip to the authorities with all the evidence they needed to arrest Damien. "Jason," I said, my voice a mixture of awe and disbelief, "do you have any idea what you've just done?" "I stopped him," he said matter-of-factly. "He can't hurt us now." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that this was the end of it, that Damien would be caught and we'd finally be safe. But deep down, I knew better. People like Damien don't give up that easily. Sure enough, the next morning, I woke up to find a brick through our front window. Attached to it was a note, scrawled in messy, angry handwriting. "This isn't over." Jason found it before I did. He read it, crumpled it up, and tossed it in the trash without a word. "Jason," I said cautiously, "maybe we should leave. Go somewhere safe until this blows over." He looked up at me, his expression calm and unshaken. "We don't need to run, Dad. I have one more move to make." I stared at him, my heart pounding. "What do you mean, one more move?" He smiled then, a small, chilling smile that sent a shiver down my spine. "You'll see." I couldn't shake the unease that came with Jason's words. "You'll see." He said it so casually, so confidently, as if the chaos that had taken over our lives was nothing more than a game he was determined to win. But this wasn't a game, not for me. Not when I'd spent the night cleaning up shattered glass and taping cardboard over the broken window, wondering if Damien would show up next with something worse than a brick. The next 2 days passed in tense silence. Jason went about his routine as though nothing had happened, but I could feel the gears turning in his mind. I didn't dare ask what he was planning. Part of me didn't want to know. I figured if I stayed out of it, maybe, just maybe, I could pretend my 10-year-old wasn't masterminding a battle against a grown criminal. Then it happened. It was late in the afternoon when the doorbell rang. My stomach sank. No one had come by in days, not since the brick, and I wasn't expecting anyone. Jason glanced up from his tablet, his face unreadable. "Don't answer it," I said instinctively, my voice low. Jason didn't reply. He just stood up, walked to the door, and peered through the peephole. Then, without hesitation, he unlocked it and swung it open. Standing there, larger than life and twice as angry, was Damien. His face was a twisted mask of fury, his eyes bloodshot and wild. He was a shadow of the smug, confident man I'd seen in old photos with Laura. This Damien looked desperate and dangerous. Where is he? Damien growled, stepping into the doorway without invitation. I moved to block his path, my heart pounding. You need to leave, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Damien sneered. Oh, I'm not going anywhere. Not until your little brat explains how he ruined my life. Jason, to my horror, stepped forward. He was calm, almost bored, as he crossed his arms and stared up at Damien. You did that all by yourself, Jason said evenly. Damien's jaw clenched. Listen, you little. You're broke, Jason interrupted, his tone sharp and cutting. You're wanted in 3 states. And now you're here, threatening me and my dad. Smart move. I reached for Jason, intending to pull him back, but he shook off my hand. Jason, stop, I hissed. But Jason didn't stop. He stepped closer to Damien, his voice steady and cold. You shouldn't have come here. You're just making things worse for yourself. Damien let out a bark of laughter. Worse? Kid, I've got nothing left to lose. That's where you're wrong, Jason said, his lips curling into a small, chilling smile. Before I could process what was happening, Jason reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, something I didn't recognize. He pressed a button, and suddenly, Damien's phone buzzed in his pocket. Damien frowned, pulling it out to see a series of files popping up on the screen. What the hell is this? Damien demanded. Proof, Jason said simply. Damien's eyes flicked over the screen, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. You little. Proof that you're a threat, Jason continued, cutting him off. Every message you've sent, every call you've made, every threat, you've left a trail. And now the authorities have it. Damien's face turned red. You're bluffing. Jason tilted his head. Am I? In that moment, I realized what Jason had done. He hadn't just been gathering evidence. He'd been preparing a trap. Damien's phone wasn't just buzzing with files. It was streaming a live feed straight to local law enforcement. Jason had turned Damien's own threats into his downfall. Damien lunged forward, his face contorted with rage. But before he could take another step, the sound of sirens filled the air. Jason didn't flinch. That'll be for you, he said calmly. Damien froze, his eyes darting toward the window. The flashing blue and red lights confirmed it. He turned back to Jason, his face a mix of fury and panic. This isn't over, he spat. Yes, it is, Jason replied, his voice cold and final. The police burst through the door moments later, their guns drawn. Damien didn't resist. He knew it was over. As they hauled him away, I stood there in stunned silence, trying to process everything that had just happened. Jason turned to me, his expression unreadable. I told you I had one more move, he said quietly. Jason, I said, my voice shaking. Do you have any idea how dangerous that was? He could have hurt you. He could have hurt both of us. But he didn't, Jason said, his tone matter of fact. And now he's gone. I wanted to yell at him, to demand answers, to make him understand that this wasn't normal, that this wasn't okay. But all I could do was stand there, staring at the boy who had just outmaneuvered a grown criminal. Jason looked up at me, his eyes calm but tired. It's over now, Dad. We're safe. But as I stood there, watching the police car disappear down the street, I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing about this was safe. The house was eerily quiet after Damien's arrest. The chaos, the threats, the lingering fear. All of it seemed to dissipate in an instant. But the silence wasn't comforting. It was heavy, suffocating, and filled with unspoken questions. Questions I wasn't sure I wanted answers to. I thought that was the end of it. Damien was out of our lives. Jason had gone back to his usual routine, and I could finally focus on rebuilding what little was left of our family. But then, Laura called. Again. I recognized the number immediately. I'd blocked her main line, but she must have found another way to contact me. I considered ignoring it. What more could she possibly say? But curiosity won out. I needed to hear it for myself. What now, Laura? I said, my tone colder than ice. Her voice was barely recognizable, weak and hoarse, like someone who hadn't slept in days. Alex, she began, but her words faltered. I don't have time for your sob stories, I snapped. If you're calling to beg for money or forgiveness, You're wasting your breath. I don't want your money, she said quietly. I don't know what I want. That caught me off guard. For the first time since this nightmare began, there was no arrogance in her tone, no entitlement, just raw, unfiltered defeat. Then why are you calling? I demanded. I'm in trouble, Alex, she admitted. Real trouble. You don't say, I replied sarcastically. She ignored my jab. The police, they're investigating me. They think I was part of Damien's scams. Weren't you? I asked, letting the accusation hang in the air. She hesitated. I didn't know what he was doing at first, she said, her voice trembling. But by the time I figured it out, it was too late. I was already tied to everything. And now they're freezing my accounts, seizing my assets. I have nothing, Alex. Nothing. That makes two of us, I shot back. Or did you forget that you wiped out Jason's college fund to finance your little adventure? I was stupid, she admitted, her voice breaking. I thought Damien loved me. I thought he'd take care of me. I let out a bitter laugh. And how's that working out for you? She didn't respond. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Why are you calling me, Laura? I asked again, this time softer, though no less firm. Because you're all I have left, she said quietly. You and Jason. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Not because they moved me. No, far from it. But because of how delusional they were. You don't have us, I said firmly. You lost us the moment you chose Damien over your family. Alex, please, she begged, her voice cracking. I made a mistake. I know I messed up, but I'm still Jason's mother. I need a second chance. Second chance? I repeated, incredulous. Laura, this isn't some minor slip-up. You stole from your own child. You abandoned him for a man you barely knew. And now that your perfect little fantasy has come crashing down, you want to come crawling back? No, absolutely not. Her sobs filled the line, but I didn't waver. I couldn't. Alex, I don't have anywhere else to go, she said, desperation seeping into every word. That's not my problem, I replied coldly. What about Jason? She asked, her voice trembling. Doesn't he deserve to have his mother in his life? Jason doesn't need you, I said bluntly. He's done more for this family in the past 2 weeks than you ever have. And he's done it without you. We don't need you, Laura. Not anymore. The line went silent. For a moment, I thought she'd hung up. But then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. So that's it? She asked. You're just going to turn your back on me? I let out a bitter laugh. You turned your back on us first, and now you're reaping what you sowed. She didn't respond. I heard her breathing, shaky and uneven, and then the call disconnected. When I turned around, Jason was standing in the doorway, watching me with that same calm expression he always wore. Was that Mom? He asked. I nodded. What did she want? To come back, I said simply. Jason didn't flinch. Did you tell her no? I did. He nodded, satisfied. Good. She doesn't deserve to come back. I wanted to tell him that it wasn't that simple, that forgiveness was supposed to be part of the process. But looking at him, so composed, so sure, I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Maybe he was right. Maybe some things really were unforgivable. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop replaying everything Jason had done, everything he had orchestrated. It was impossible not to marvel at his brilliance. A 10-year-old had managed to outwit grown adults, dismantle a criminal scheme, and save his family from ruin, all while keeping an unnerving level of composure. It was impressive, no doubt about it, but it was also terrifying. Jason didn't act like a normal child. He didn't respond to situations with fear or hesitation. Instead, he calculated, strategized, and executed with precision. It was as if every decision he made was part of a grand chess game only he could see. And while I couldn't deny the effectiveness of his actions, I couldn't ignore the coldness behind them. One evening, as I sat on the couch staring at the cardboard over the window, Jason came into the room. He had that same calm, confident expression he always wore, but there was something different about his eyes, something heavier. Dad, he said, sitting down beside me, are you mad at me? The question caught me off guard. Mad at you? For what? For everything I did, he said simply. For going after Mom and Damien. For not telling you. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. How could I even begin to answer that? Jason, I started carefully, what you did. It's not something a 10-year-old should ever have to do. It's not something anyone should have to do. But I did it, he said, his tone unflinching. And it worked. It did, I admitted. But it's not just about whether it worked. It's about what it means. He frowned. What do you mean? I hesitated, searching for the right words. Jason, the way you handled things, it wasn't normal. It wasn't healthy. You shouldn't have to think like that, to act like that. You're just a kid. His expression didn't change. I did what needed to be done. If I hadn't, who would have stopped them? I wanted to argue, to tell him it wasn't his responsibility, that I should have been the one to handle it. But deep down, I knew he was right. I had been paralyzed by anger and grief, too caught up in my own pain to act. Jason had stepped in because I hadn't, and that realization cut deeper than anything else. You're smart, Jason, I said after a long pause. Smarter than I'll ever be. But you're also my son, and it's my job to protect you, not the other way around. He looked at me then, his eyes searching mine. But what if you can't? He asked softly. What if it's up to me? I didn't have an answer. How could I, when the evidence was staring me in the face? Jason had protected us. He had saved us. But at what cost? In the weeks that followed, life slowly began to return to normal, or at least, as normal as it could be. Damien was behind bars, and Laura had gone silent, likely too caught up in her own legal troubles to bother us anymore. The house was quiet, peaceful even, but that peace felt fragile, like a thin sheet of glass ready to shatter at the slightest touch. One afternoon, I found Jason in the garage, tinkering with a new project. It was a drone, sleek and meticulously built, with wires and circuits laid out in perfect order. He looked up when I entered, offering a small smile. Hey, Dad, he said. What's up? I leaned against the doorway, watching him work. You're always building something, aren't you? He shrugged. I like it. It keeps my mind busy. That's a good thing, I said carefully. But Jason, you don't always have to be fixing things. Sometimes, it's okay to let things just be. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he focused on soldering a tiny wire, his hands steady and precise. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. I don't know how to do that. What do you mean? He set down the soldering iron and looked at me, his expression serious. I don't know how to just let things be. If something's broken, I have to fix it. If there's a problem, I have to solve it. It's just how I think. I wanted to tell him that he didn't have to carry that burden, that it wasn't his responsibility to fix everything. But I knew better. Jason wasn't like other kids. He saw the world differently, and no amount of reassurance from me would change that. You've got a gift, Jason, I said finally, but it's also a responsibility. You're going to have to decide how to use it and who to trust with it. He nodded, his eyes thoughtful. I know. I watched him for a moment longer, my chest tight with a mixture of pride and worry. Jason was brilliant, no question about it. But brilliance could be a double-edged sword. It could build or destroy, heal or hurt. And I could only hope that, as he grew, he would choose to build. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about Laura's final words to me. You raised a son who doesn't just survive, he conquers. But be careful, Alex. One day, his heart might be too cold to save. I didn't want to believe her, but the thought lingered. Jason was more than just a survivor. He was a force to be reckoned with. And while I was proud of him, I couldn't shake the fear that his brilliance, unchecked, might one day lead him down a path I couldn't follow. For now, though, we had peace. And I was determined to protect it, for both our sakes.